Last chance for Russia, EU and US to propose new ceasefire in Ukraine. May 10, 2025. The EU and the US have nearly finalized a ceasefire proposal between Ukraine and Russia. If it is not accepted, Moscow will face new sanctions, Reuters reports. According to an anonymous source cited by the outlet, the United States and its European allies are completing work on proposals for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. It is known that if Russia rejects the proposal, it will trigger a joint introduction of new sanctions against Moscow. We're not completely with a finalized project, but we hoped that we're at a moment of convergence, the source said. According to an anonymous source cited by the outlet, discussions are still ongoing over whether to declare a unilateral ceasefire or give Russia a short window to respond. However, if Moscow refuses new US and EU sanctions, it will be imposed. What could happen in the coming hours and days? There could be an announcement of a ceasefire either of 30 days or compartmentalized, which is still being discussed, the source stated. The outlet reports that French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, who was in Washington last week for a meeting with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, will join French President Emmanuel Macron in Kiev on Saturday. There, a hybrid meeting of Ukraine's closest allies will take place to discuss the US-European ceasefire proposal. The source said that political and technical talks between Europe and the US have intensified since last week. US President Donald Trump and Macron discussed the ceasefire proposals on Thursday. We felt in the discussions with the Americans a certain irritation towards the Russian posture, the lack of reactivity and seriousness in its responses to what was proposed before. The decision is practically taken, the source said. Earlier today, two political leaders raised the possibility of implementing a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Finnish President Alexander Stubb stated that Ukraine and Russia are close to reaching a ceasefire agreement. According to Stubb, the ideal scenario would be for the ceasefire in Ukraine to be announced before the weekend. At the same time, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that a ceasefire deal in Ukraine could be possible within the next 2 days. Over the past year, Russia has repeatedly rejected proposals for a 30-day ceasefire. Instead, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has unilaterally declared ceasefires with Ukraine. However, despite the Kremlin leader's statements, fighting continues on the front lines and an increase in attacks is recorded. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha responded, stressing that Putin's ceasefire turned out to be a farce. By RBC Ukraine, story by Darina Vielko, May 10, 2025.